his consent to speak to up to 5 minutes on the member's record-breaking stint as an MPP. Tenure, I think it's. Do we agree? Agreed. The member from London West.
It is an honour for me to rise today as the NDP critic for women's issues to pay tribute to the member for York Simcoe. As the longest-serving woman MPP ever elected in this province, she has represented her constituents well for more than 22 years, successfully contesting 6 elections between 1995 and 2014 and achieving a remarkable milestone for women in Ontario. Speaker, let's reflect on what the Ontario legislature looked like in 1995, the year Julia was first elected as MPP. Of the 130 MPPs who would be taking their seats at Queen's Park that year, just 19 were women, who made up 14.6% of the provincial legislature. Of the 82 Progressive Conservatives who were elected to the PC caucus, only 11 were women, making up just 13.4% of all PC members of the legislature. As the Globe and Mail reported shortly after the 1995 PC victory, welcome to the new 82-member Conservative caucus at Queen's Park, which met for the first time this week. It's almost completely white, mainly male, with the overwhelming majority of its members coming from small business backgrounds. I suspect the member for York Simcoe was unfazed to find herself among her new colleagues. After all, both of her 1995 campaign opponents were men, and one was an incumbent, so she could certainly hold her own in the male-dominated world of politics. With her husband John, she managed both a family farm as well as a dog breeding business, making her as knowledgeable as any of her male colleagues about the challenges of running a small business. And as a secondary school educator for 28 years prior to her election, one can imagine that her discipline and classroom management skills were certainly an asset. A rookie MPP, Monroe was appointed as parliamentary assistant to the Premier to promote volunteerism, prompting the Ottawa Citizen to comment, "Monroe is a rare creature in Premier Mike Harris's government. She's actually been asked to come up with ideas rather than simply end, repeal or reduce things." Julia Monroe was born in Hamilton in 1942 and was raised in Toronto. After graduating with a BA in History from the University of Toronto, she began her career as a teacher in 1971. After 24 years teaching history in Markham, she became a secondary school department head for the York Region Board of Education. Like many women who become involved in political life, Julia saw a problem and wanted to fix it. A Toronto Star article covering the 1995 race states, Monroe says she used to sit around the kitchen table complaining about the state of politics and finally decided she had to get involved. She became active in her local PC Riding Association, serving as riding president from 1992 to 1994, and she put her name on the ballot in 1995 for the riding then known as Durham York. In 1999, she was re-elected in York North, a seat she held in 2003 despite the defeat of the government. She was re-elected in 2007, 2011, and most recently in 2014. I asked my NDP colleagues for juicy stories about Julia that I could share in my tribute. The thing is, there are none. She is always prepared and always professional. Her style is calm and reassuring, practical and unruffled. During legislative debates, her remarks are well-structured and well-researched. In committee, she is known for her ability to ask pointed questions that cut right to the core of an issue. Instead of juicy stories, what my colleagues did tell me was about Julia's warm smile, her droll sense of humour and her dry wit, and the twinkle in her eye when one would least expect it. The member for Kitchener-Waterloo told me about the advice she received from Julia after the 2014 election. Noticing my NDP colleague despondent and alone in the dining room, Julia asked what was wrong. She listened carefully, reflected on what had been shared, nodded and said, "Catherine, the best thing you can do is sleep." This quiet bit of wisdom exemplifies Julia's pragmatic approach and helped change my colleague's perspective on life at Queen's Park. Julia still checks in every once in a while to see how the member for Kitchener-Waterloo is doing and whether she is following the advice that was imparted. Throughout her political career, Julia has been deeply committed to encouraging citizen participation in political life. Interviewed during her 2011 election campaign, she emphasized that an engaged citizenry is the key to our system and warned against the erosion of democracy that is caused by cynicism or apathy. Speaker, of all her accomplishments, this is perhaps Julia Munro's most important legacy. For that, all Ontarians, and Ontario women in particular, are the richer. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Further responses? The Minister responsible for the status of women.
It is an honour for me to rise today to recognise the member from York Simcoe as we celebrate a remarkable milestone she's accomplished. MPP Munro is now the longest-serving female MPP in Ontario's history. And this is a truly impressive achievement and one we should all be proud of. For 21 years, the member from York Simcoe has been serving the people of Ontario. For 21 years, she has been the voice for the people in her riding. No question, her presence in the legislature over the past 21 years is truly inspiring. The member has served her constituents and the people of Ontario longer than any other woman in our province. Just think about that. You know, there was a time when people thought there was no place for women in politics. Well, they were wrong. There is place, room for women in politics, and women like MPP Munro are living proof of that. But no matter how far we've come as Ontario's first-ever Minister of the Status of Women, I know that it is trailblazers like the member for York Simcoe who have paved the way for women, and I thank her for that. She is a change-maker, and the world has changed a lot over the last 21 years. More and more women are now getting involved in government, getting elected and becoming our leaders. Much of that is due to the strong and successful women in the legislature, right here, women like the member for York Simcoe, women who have shown us that it is possible to dream, and it is possible to make that dream a reality. Throughout her career, MPP Munro has inspired many people and broken many barriers. And, Speaker, it is especially fitting that we are recognizing the member today, because this is the start of International Women's Week. Later this week, we will also recognize International Women's Day. This year's theme is Equality Matters, and yes, it does. For our government, gender equality is of critical importance. And as I look around this House, I see that two of our three-party leaders, Premier Kathleen Wynne and NDP leader Andrea Horwath, are women. I also see Elizabeth Dowdeswell, our female Lieutenant Governor, and our new female Sergeant-at-Arms, Jackie Gordon. I see a cabinet appointed by our Premier that is 40% women, the highest percentage in Ontario's history. Hear, hear. And I see a government that has set a target of 40% of all provincial board and agency appointments by 2019. We are doing this because we are challenging not only ourselves, but businesses as well, to put more women in positions of leadership. We are doing this because gender diversity in Ontario leadership benefits us all. And we are doing this because absolutely it's the right thing to do. Speaker, the member's service to Ontario benefits and inspires us all. It has contributed to creating a more equal society, and I am grateful grateful to women like her who help raise the status of women both in our legislature and in our province. I want to thank the member from York Simcoe for leading the way, for being a trailblazer, and for showing women and girls out there that, yes, you too can have a voice in politics. I offer my best wishes as she celebrates this historic achievement. Thank you.
Thank you. Further responses. The member from Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an honour and privilege to rise in the House today to acknowledge and to celebrate the accomplishment of a remarkable woman, someone I take great pride in calling my good friend and distinguished colleague. As 2017 reflects the 100th anniversary in Ontario of women's right to vote, it also holds another milestone in our province for women in government. First elected in June 1995, Julia Monroe, our respected colleague from York Simcoe, now stands as Ontario's longest-serving woman Member of Parliament. Today, she has surpassed 7,944 days as a member of this legislature. Julia's career at Queen's Park spans 6 consecutive provincial elections, 3 riding name changes representing Durham York, York North, and York Simcoe. After her first victory in the 1995 election, Julia was named Parliamentary Assistant to the Premier in the newly elected Mike Harris government. She would go on to serve as the Government Whip, Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Transportation, the Chair of Management Board of Cabinet, and the Minister of Culture in subsequent parliaments. And that, Mr. Speaker, is when things changed for Julia and our fellow colleagues, as the next election and the 3 to follow relegated Team Blue to official opposition status. Yet Julia continued her work as an MPP without missing a beat, understanding and respecting her role and representing her constituents with the same energy and care. In opposition, Julia has served as critic for culture twice, seniors twice, children's services twice, community and social services twice, and poverty reduction strategy 3 times, along with the sitting on 13 different committees. That's what happens when you stick around so long. Through all the years with her beloved husband John and daughter Genevieve by her side, Julia's devotion and dedication to politics and serving in office have never wavered. Julia has always been passionate about her policy work. An avid dog lover and breeder, Julia has fought for animal rights, regulations and standards of care. With her keen interest in the financial health and security of Ontarians, Julia introduced new legislation to establish a small business bill of rights and most notably advocated for her bill on pooled registered pension plans twice. As some of you may know, Julia was not always a politician. Prior to her time at Queen's Park, Julia worked as an educator, serving the majority of her time as a high school history teacher. And not surprisingly, her reputation with her students reflected the level of commitment and perspective she imparted on their learning. Kicking up the cool factor even for a history teacher, one of Julia's former students was Tyler Stewart, the drummer of the infamous Canadian rock band Bare Naked Ladies. In an interview for Professionally Speaking magazine for a story entitled Bare Naked Ladies, Remarkable Teachers, when Tyler was asked to choose the high school teacher that had the greatest impact on him, he chose Julia Monroe. He praised her for her ability to make history interesting in a way that would relate to individual students' interests. He went on to say, "I found that she really respected the intellect of her students. She really seemed to have a grasp of each kid's capabilities and set jobs for them accordingly." As much as Julia made history interesting for her students, she remains a history buff herself. Julia was asked who her political hero was, to which she answered Elizabeth Simcoe, also known as Elizabeth Gwilym. Elizabeth was a diarist, historian and artist, and the wife of the first Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, John Graves Simcoe. Elizabeth's diary and some 595 paintings left for us a vibrant story of life in colonial Ontario, and her name is lent to 2 townships in Julia's riding, East and West Gwillimbury. That's a testament to Julia's love of history and government in one snapshot. To know Julia is to know honesty, integrity, sincerity, and thoughtfulness personified. To work with Julia is to work with commitment, intention, compassion, and conviction. Her success lies in a legacy of not only one fulfilled career, but 2. Her bond with people, whether past students or current constituents, is based in genuine care, concern, admiration, and respect. Julia's always seen her role as that of a conduit, saying, "The one promise I make to voters is to work hard and be accessible." I have always kept in mind that I am here to speak up for my constituents. There's a humble grace for her purpose. As one of my dear colleagues reflected, she quietly and competently goes about her job, does it very well, and never seeks the limelight. She draws attention to the issues she cares about, but doesn't try to draw attention to herself. She is beloved by her constituents and admired and respected by everyone at Queen's Park, where she is often referred to as Lady Monroe. So it is only fitting that the former and distinguished history teacher who left her mark on her students so many years ago now leaves her own mark in our parliamentary history books as the longest-serving woman MPP in Ontario. We honour and salute you. Congratulations. Well done.
I thank all of the members for their very heartfelt and kind comments, and I would just only add that I am always amazed and impressed with your grace, particularly through any adversity that you've challenged, and you've taken them and come out the other side. So I congratulate you on this wonderful milestone. I would like to offer the member an opportunity to respond. You can't have 15 minutes, but you can have some time.
Well, I'm glad you set the limit, because I don't feel that there is quite the same opportunity for me to respond as those of you who have chosen to respond, because you at least had some warning. But I do want to say that it is a moment of a great deal of emotion for me as I listen to our members and reflect on the pieces of information they've been able to find and the way in which they have been able to portray me. I certainly will always, always remember the sincerity and the warmth of the comments that have been made here this morning. It's funny how life treats you. When it was referenced about sitting around the kitchen table, and people have asked me, and I've always said, that's the part of our democracy, that's your responsibility to be engaged. And that's why sitting at the kitchen table won't cut it. But I also, and I know that there were a couple of references made by the press, but one that I liked particularly was the local editor of the local paper who interviewed me, and in his write-up, he described me as someone who had climbed out of the crib and crawled to the right. So I thought that was okay. I didn't mind that at all. I learned so much from the people that have passed through the halls of the Ontario legislature, the people who have sat in the seats before us. I remember walking in here the first time as an elected person and looking around the room, and at that point, I think it was the 36th Parliament, but I might be wrong. But the point is that I sat down and I looked around the room and I saw all the chairs and I thought, this is only the 36th time that somebody has come in and sat here. That's overwhelming. And to think that I'm one of them now, and to think that each of you is one of them, and the responsibility that that carries with it. It carries with it for today and the problems that we try to wrestle with today, but it also speaks to the people who've gone before us, the people who've understood the important value of this building and what it stands for and the significance. And it has never left me, I'm pleased to say. I'm pleased to say that I can walk in here 21 years later and still feel that tremendous aura of what this building represents. And I think our job as MPPs is to make sure that we contribute to that so that the next generation understand the value of what's here. And one of the things that I like to quote is one where it describes the system as like a wild garden that needs tending. And so we have the basics here. We have the garden. Our responsibility and that of our children and grandchildren is to tend that garden. On the frame of my license plate, it says, "Democracy, don't waste it."
A fine example for all young women and men to look forward to in terms of what this place means. Thank you very much for your contribution. We will make sure that